Today we are going to do another top 5 video. Now yeah, there was a top 5 video that came out just a couple days ago, I understand, but this one was actually supposed to be out before that one was a very long time ago. If you guys remember my first top 5 best top tier jets video, I also planned on making a top 5 worst right after that to kind of go with it, but I just never got around to it. So today we're going to correct that, and we are going to make our top 5 worst to go with the most recent top 5 best. You guys seem to really like the top 5 videos. It kind of just pops off every time I make one, so for as long as there's a demand for it, I'm going to try to keep making them, and I will do different topics moving into the future. And no, they're not going to be as close together, at least upload date, as they are this time, but you know, as long as there's an audience and people like them, I will keep doing them, because they are actually pretty fun to actually make, and it causes a lot of discussion in the comments and stuff like that, which is really cool. And to be blunt, it just helps grow my channel, which is also really nice. The same list of disclaimers and caveats on the last top 5 list also apply to this one. The worst aircraft in the game is of course going to be subjective to you. It's ultimately down to your opinion. This video is just my opinion. Our opinions don't have to agree, they're probably not always going to agree, but nonetheless, let's get into it with number 5. The Mirage F1C is not a plane that I like. I've never liked it. I've always thought it was really bad, and if you guys have watched my streams and asked me to play it and whatnot, you'll probably get a response like, why would I ever play the Mirage F1? It's garbage, and it's because it is. That's why it made the list. But it is number 5 because it is not complete garbage. While the flight performance is absolutely abysmal, the radar kind of sucks. The radar missiles kind of suck because they are eaten by chaff. They are not CW guided. They are pulse guided, which means they go for chaff just as easily as IR missiles go for flares, unlike literally every SAR at top tier. The other missiles are actually pretty nice, and it kind of does carry the Mirage F1 onto number 5, because everything about this plane is bad, but just the nature of top tier allows you to still actually be successful in the Mirage F1. Mainly because you get 2 Magic 2 missiles, and the Magic 2s are absolutely baller missiles right now in top tier. If you guys have used them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're kind of on crack. The one big downside, in my opinion, to the Magic 2 is how long it takes this thing to arm. If you launch in a head-on at very close range, you will probably have noticed that your Magic 2 just kind of flies by the target and never detonates. That's because this missile takes like a whole 1.8 seconds to actually arm itself when it comes off of the rail, unlike everything else at top tier, which is I think about half of a second, don't quote me on that, but it is significantly shorter time to arm than the Magic 2s, and sometimes that does make you miss out on a kill. Other than that though, these missiles are fantastic. Great flare resistance, 35G, you absolutely feel all 35 of those Gs when it's pulling. They have pretty good range, and their acceleration is absolutely nuts. You also have a pretty damn good gimbal limit for the seat your head to move around, so you can give it good lead and stuff, and make it a pretty viable weapon up close and dogfight kind of ranges. Then there's that big boy IR guided missile, the RO530E or something like that. It's that really big heat seeker that the Mirage F1 has. It's not the best, it'll get flared pretty easily, it only pulls 15 Gs, but believe it or not, you will get quite a few kills with that, at least in current top tier, and that's mainly just because of F-14s. The F-14 hit signature is very, very hot, and it allows you to shoot it at some pretty awkward angles, close to all aspect, and 15 Gs, not the best, but it will get the job done as long as they don't see the missile coming, and very often they won't. So you have 5 at least usable missiles on the Mirage F1, and honestly, that's a lot more than what many of the planes on this list can say, and you'll see that moving forward. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and move on to our number 4 plane. And the F4F is one of those aircraft that a lot of people say is the worst top tier in the game. They will say that this plane is completely useless, and you know, they're not necessarily wrong. That's why it's on a top 5 worst planes of top tier list. But I don't think it is the absolute worst, because in the end of the day, it's still got an internal 20mm Vulcan, it's still got Agile Eagle like the F4E Phantom, and while the AIM-9Js are really not very impressive at all, they can get you kills, and you have 4 of them. So of all the planes that are on this list, I don't think that this one is particularly going to be the worst. Power wise, the engines are pretty strong. You will go pretty fast on the deck in a straight line, so you're actually going to be able to catch quite a few aircraft on the battlefield, which again is a lot more than some of these other guys can say on this list. We'll get to that later. And that's really important because even if your plane sucks, if you can't catch anyone, it sucks even more. So at least being a bad plane that can get to the enemies and have a fighting chance, because you can actually bring a fight to somebody. Having a plane that has the capability of going Mach 1.15 on the deck is really nice to have, especially on something that isn't all that powerful otherwise. I usually run 20 minutes on my Phantoms because the low fuel Phantom, as many of you may still know, is a pretty damn good flight model. You bleed energy pretty rapidly in all of the Agile Eagle Phantoms, or I should say both of the Agile Eagle Phantoms, just by any kind of maneuvering really. As long as you're holding S for any period of time, you're going to be losing energy rather quickly in exchange for a lot of angle of attack, which is going to help you get your Vulcan shots on target. But when you're losing speed, the sustained fighting capability just isn't always there. However, on low fuel, the Phantom can kind of just sit on its engines, similar to what you see a Mirage 2000 do, except not to that extent, but very much to the extent of some of the other Delta Wings in the game. And while you might be losing energy, it's probably still going to lend you a shot in the end. You just have to make sure that you don't actually miss it. As long as you're comfortable with using the Vulcan and trying to get as many kills as possible with your gun, a little bit outdated, I understand, but it is still the Vulcan in the end of the day. It's probably the easiest thing to aim. If you're going to get gun kills consistently, this is a good one to do it with. You also get a rather reassuring amount of countermeasures on this plane, and while the AIM-9J again is nothing impressive, in the current top tier you're facing a lot of F-14s, and the AIM-9J is one of those missiles that the F-14 has a pretty difficult time flaring in a rear aspect launch, and you get 4 of them. So that's kind of nice, but let's go ahead and move on to number 3. Firstly, this is the F4E, not the EJ, but I do mean the EJ on the list, at least top 5 worst planes. I just don't actually have the EJ, and I had forgotten to request a test drive for it. So we just slapped a Japanese skin on there and only use the AIM-7Es because the EJ does not actually have access to E2 Sparrows. So take away the Agile Eagle and it's basically the same plane. That is a pretty big deal though, so I'm not, just glancing over the fact that the F4E has Agile Eagle. You're going to see me do things in this clip that the F4EJ just simply can't do. The EJ is honestly just not a very good plane. You have the standard F4E Phantom loadout, which is pretty mid these days, I will admit. You do get the internal Vulcan though on top of that, and while your missiles are pretty mid, you get 8 of them, which is still a pretty big deal. Unfortunately for the EJ though, again, like I said, there's no E2 Sparrow, so your AIM-7Es are even worse than mid. What do you guys call that? You Zoomers these days with all of your funny gamer language. What's the step below mid? And well, that's what the AIM-7E is. So all things considered, you have a non-pulse Doppler radar Phantom. Peep that team kill, by the way. You have a non-pulse Doppler Phantom with AIM-7Es and not even using Agile Eagle, and your IR missiles are AIM-9Js. That's not a very good loadout at all, and you're not going to have a very fun time. The F4E and the F4F can at least use that Vulcan a lot easier given their Agile Eagle. It definitely helps for pulling shots, but the EJ not having Agile Eagle, you're going to have a really hard time getting your nose on target with just about anybody unless you just pop your air brake and make them just turn outside of your turning radius because you're going way slower than them. The problem is, if you miss your shot there, you're absolutely boned. There's just nothing fun and redeeming about playing the EJ in 2022. I'd recommend skipping this plane. It's not going to be a fun time. I don't want to waste too much time on it, so just to summarize one more time, you don't have Agile Eagle, you don't have Pulse Doppler, your missiles are even worse than the normal F4E's missiles. In all things considered, your mid-flight performance and your less than mid-killing potential is going to really affect your gameplay experience when you're playing this plane. The only saving grace is the fact that it does have so many weapons, you at least get a lot of tries. You just better hope that one of them actually works, and the odds of that are relatively low comparatively speaking to everything else at top tier. At number 2, we have the F5A. A lot of you probably forgot that this plane even exists. This is the first F5 ever to be added into War Thunder. It's in the Chinese tech tree. It's a Taiwan vehicle. And It's basically, well, not basically, it literally is the F5A in the US tech tree, or the F5C, which most of you are probably familiar with. That is also in the US tech tree. The F5C, of course, being the premium, and the F5A is the US event vehicle or whatever that's on the Gaijin marketplace. The only difference between them is that this one has AIM-9Ps, whereas the other ones have AIM-9Es. Other than that, you're the exact same plane, but since you have better missiles, it somehow is going to warrant you being a 0.7 higher BR, even though they're only AIM-9Ps. Now in a perfect world, I probably wouldn't even have the F5A at 11.0. I'd have it even higher if I had my way with the BRs, but let's not get into that. That's a topic for another video. Battle rating, compression, and whatnot, you know what I mean. But given the current state of War Thunder, I don't think that there's any reason that this plane can't be 10.7. That being said, I also don't see why, given Gaijin's method of balancing things, this plane isn't 10.3. Again, I'm not advocating for this thing to be 10.3. That's not at all what I mean. I think it could be fine at 10.7, honestly. I'm just saying that given Gaijin's current way of like deciding BRs and everything, I don't see why they haven't put it at 10.3. It's literally the same as their other 10.3 F5s, except it has AIM-9Ps, which really isn't that big of a deal when you look at all of the other missiles that they have no problem with being at 10.3. You have R60s, R60Ms, AIM-9Ls, AIM-9G, which is just as good if not better than the AIM-9P. All of these missiles that are already at such a low battle rating, and yet for some reason they're okay with putting the F5 at 10.3, just not with these missiles, because they're just so good. I don't understand it, man. Either way, I'm happy it's not 10.3, I'm just confused, that's all. Little rant. Playing this thing at 11.0 and 11.3 is complete misery. You have the F5C engines, so you guys know the F5E and everything. It's literally the same thing as the F5E, except the F5E has better engines, which is a really, really big deal. Either way, none of them are particularly fun anymore. It's even worse, though, when you have these weak-ass engines. You're really slow in an F5, you can't even really go past 1.05 Mach on the deck, and even that is going to take a long time to do in a straight line. The F5s have historically, at least in War Thunder, always relied on guns to get most of their kills, and that was pretty effective for a while. The guns are really nice and the flight model is pretty clean, at least the F5Es. But in 2022 War Thunder with the F14 and everything, gunplay is harder than it's ever been. You have missiles in the sky at all times, and it feels like you're constantly on the defensive, and if you don't have any missiles to fight back with, you're going to be having a really miserable time. You might be wondering, what could be worse than the F5A at 11.0? Well, and here you have it, the worst top tier in all of War Thunder. Top tier being 11.0 to 11.3, of course. And no, this is not the Kfir C2, even though that's what I mean when I say the worst plane. Kfir C2 is the worst plane in the game. Same story with the F4EJ here. I had forgotten to request a test drive because, like many of you, I forgot the Kfir C2 even existed. So for the sake of entertainment, we have the Kfir C7 on screen, which no, is not on this list at all. It is not a top 5 worst planes, but we are just using two AIM-9Gs to simulate the Kfir C2. Yes, the Kfir C2 only has two AIM-9Gs at battle rating 11.0. And what do you have after you've used your whole two missiles? DEFAs. Yes, offensively, this plane is a complete nightmare. Good luck getting any kills at top tier when you have DEFAs for your main armament. These guns are a chronic pain in the dick to aim, they have very low muzzle velocity, and they do pretty pitiful damage unless you get a lucky fuel tank explosion, which literally any gun is going to one-shot if you're exploding fuel tanks. AIM-9Gs are not terrible missiles. I think that they're the lowest tier. A lot of people are disagree with me. That's fine, that's your opinion. If you love AIM-9Gs, cool. I just personally think that they appear on the screen too long to be as effective as some of the other ones, and by appear on the screen I mean that missile marker and everything is there for too long. It lets people know it's coming for a lot longer and hence is a lot easier to flare and whatnot. Also, a topic for another video, which I will probably coming out with not too long into the future. In the end of the day though, it is top tier, and you are still probably going to be getting a missile kill with the AIM-9G rather frequently. Again, the problem is you only have two of them, and after that you're left with these shitty top tier guns. And even not in top tier, the DEFAs are pretty damn annoying to use, let's be honest. Nobody really likes them, it seems, and if you do like them, you're simply wrong and your opinion is invalid. The flight performance, while the Fear C2 does have a considerably weaker engine than the C7, it is still quite a rocket ship, not gonna lie. The problem is that even if your flight performance is fantastic, if you don't have any killing potential, which I don't really think that the Fear C2 does, you're not going to be very effective to your team. Not only is the killing potential very lackluster, but your defensive potential is very lackluster too, because you have like an entire 8 drops of countermeasures that you could use. I believe it's 16 if you're using only one type, so if you only want to bring flares or you only want to bring chaff, I think you can get up to 16 drops, but if you're like everyone else and you take mixed, then you're going to be getting a whole 8 drops of countermeasures. And you know what, I take that back, I believe it's 7 drops of countermeasures at that. All in all, a pathetic 11.0. Let me know what your top 5 worst planes are down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope I'll see you on the next one. See ya.